Hi everyone! First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. During this webinar, we will tell you more about structured interviews and how you can make better hiring decisions in the future. To shortly introduce ourselves, I am Penelope, consultant at Skilled, and my main role is to help my clients in product adoption, which give me great insights on the biggest challenges faced by HR teams. This is Solène, also consultant at Skilled, who supports companies in their talent acquisition journey. So during this webinar, we will introduce structured interviews and how you can implement it within your company, obviously. And then we will explain the scorecards, the advantages of using it, and we'll show you also how you can integrate them with the Skilled platform. So this presentation will take around 30 minutes and will be followed by a Q&A session. So before starting, this webinar is recorded and will be sent to you after the session. Feel free to share it with your team members if they were not able to attend. And also, if you have any questions, so you can ask them in the chat box on the Q&A tab on the right side. So this is anonymous. You can ask as many questions as you want, and we'll answer in the end. Solène, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here with us this morning, and thanks, Penelope, for this introduction. So it's now time to deep dive into our subject of today. So we will start with a quick definition of what is a structured interview to introduce you a little bit more to the concept. So a structured interview is a standardized method of evaluating job candidates in which all the candidates are asked the same predetermined question in the same order, and while all the interviewers score the answer using a standardized method. So it's allowed to gather consistent and comparable data. Well, so far, it looks quite simple, but there is a lot more to know about the structured interview process, and we'll go through them together today. So now that you know what a structured interview is, which is our main focus of today, we will just take a quick step back onto the concept to compare the different types of interview style. So you have first the unstructured interview, which is a type of interview in which the interviewer asks questions which are not prepared in advance. Instead, the question will arise spontaneously in a free-flowing conversation. So it's really a natural conversation, but it means that the candidates are asked different questions. There is no grading scale, and all the interviewers do not need to agree on the acceptable answer. So they can really rate the different questions differently. And in the end, the candidates are not experiencing the same interview process. I know that at first glance, the structured interview may appear very attractive because there is a loose framework, the conversational flow is very, very convenient, it seems very natural to discuss with the candidate, but those same features that appears very attractive to you make this type of interview very, very subjective, and it will reduce the accuracy of your interview, and it can even sometimes invite some legal challenges. Because it has been shown by several research that constantly draw on the same conclusion that unstructured interviews have little value in predicting job performance. Because those structured interviews typically demonstrate first a low level of reliability, because there is no rating consistency among the interviewers. There is also a low level of validity, regarding what is measured during the interview, because different interviewers ask a different question to several candidates. They are not asked the same question, and they are not evaluated on the same criteria. Then, in between the unstructured interview and the fully structured interview, we will have the semi-structured interview, which is a hybrid type of interview in which the interviewer asks few predetermined questions, but the rest of the questions are not planned in advance. So this type of interview allows a bit for the objective comparison of the candidate thanks to some structured question and predetermined question, but it still gives more flexibility to the recruiter. So this type of semi-structured interview can be a solution if you want to have a smooth transition toward the fully structured interview to benefit from all those predictive benefits. But let's be honest, the fully structured interview are the one interview style that present the most advantage. So I will show you the different advantage of the structured interviewing process. So first of all, you will have more consistency because all candidates are treated the same way, because the decision maker have the same information for every candidate. So the comparison can be made very easily and quickly in terms of candidate potential for success. And structured interviews are also more predictive because the research showed that the structured interviews are up to twice as effective at predicting the job performance than the unstructured one. So it's really more reliable if you want to hire the right candidate. You will also gain in fairness because all candidates are treated objectively since the questions are based on the job requirements. So it will also allow the candidate to really see the link between what he's being evaluated on and really the job requirement. So it will really minimizes the bias or the personality preference that could otherwise affect, for instance, a hiring manager with his decision to move forward with a candidate or another if he has more feeling with one of the other candidates. So obviously, from fairness, it stems a better experience because for the candidate, they will feel like they're being treated with honesty and respect. And the recruiter can really oversee the whole process. They can keep everyone on track. They will also, thanks to the really structured process, be able to predict when the role will be filled. They can be very, very transparent with the candidate all along the recruitment process. The next benefit is not to be underestimated because it's legal protection. Indeed, the structured interview can give you more legal protection because first, they predict performance better than the unstructured one, and also because they provide more detailed job-related documentation, so they are significantly more defensible in court. And it has been proven in a recent research in a case review that among the unstructured interview, only 13% of them were found discriminatory, whereas 50% of the interview unstructured have received the same ruling. So it means that more than half of your unstructured interview are proven discriminatory for your candidate. So this is really a lot. And then we'll also gain in effectiveness because one structured interview can provide the same amount of accurate information as 4 unstructured interviews. So the structured hiring process can also make your hiring process not only more accurate, but also more efficient. So I will just now present you a few figures, key figures about the structured interviewing. So about the performance prediction, the structured interviews are up to twice as effective at predicting job performance than the unstructured ones. So it means that the structured interview will provide you with up to 100% more performance in predicting candidate potential for success. The structured interview also allow you to retrieve more accurate information since the structured interview are 4 times more accurate than the unstructured one. So it's really a way to make your recruitment process more efficient and to gain time among your recruiters. And then you will learn that the unstructured interview is the most frequently used interview technique. It has been said in a LinkedIn study that 74% of the HR professionals around the world have declared using the unstructured interview method because they are convinced of all their benefits. So we hope that you are now convinced that the structured interviewing is the way to go. So it's now time to see how to do it. And we will show you in 5 easy steps how to create a structured interviewing process. So, as a first step, you will have to conduct a job analysis and determine the competencies to be assessed by the interview. So the purpose of a job analysis is to identify the requirement of the job and the competencies necessary to perform the job. So you will carry a thorough analysis that will aim at identifying the job task and responsibilities, identify the competencies that are required to successfully perform the job task and the responsibilities of the job. You will have to identify which of those competencies are required upon entry to the job. And then, once you have identified the critical competencies, you will determine which will be assessed in the selection process and how each competency will be measured, for instance, using a written test or during the interview. The structured interview is typically used to assess between 4 and 6 competencies, but it really depends also on the uniqueness of the job or the level of responsibilities of the job you are opening. So I hope everything is clear for this first step of job analysis. Now for the second step, it's time to choose the interview format and to develop the respective question. So for the structured interview process, you can use the 2 classical types of interview questions. So you can use the behavioral interview style or the situational question or a mix of both. So the interview format will determine how your questions are developed. But regardless of the format of your interview, the question that you will create should be, it is very important that they are reflective of the competencies that are derived from the job analysis. They need to be realistic of the responsibilities of the job. It is very important that they are open-ended questions. There is room for the candidate to develop on the question. They need to be clear and concise. So it is really important when you are creating your question to ensure that they are very clear for all the candidates, really straightforward. For instance, if candidates are not having the interview in their mother tongue, that they are really clear and understandable for everyone, so that every candidate have the same chance to perform the interview. So that was the step for developing the question. Now that you have developed all your questions based on the competencies you want to assess in the interview, you will have to develop a rating scale to evaluate your candidate on the same scale. So the rating scale is a key component of a structured interview process. It's really the central component of the interview process because it will allow you to rate your candidate in the same way. And you can develop a standardized rating scale for the both type of interview questions, so for the behavioral question and for the situational interview question. The process will just be slightly different at some point. I will explain both options. So the first step in the development of a standardized rating scale is to specify the range of proficiency of each competency that you want to assess. So first of all, you will decide on one proficiency level range for all competencies. So for instance, you will opt for a range from 1 to 4, with 1 being the least proficient and 4 being the most proficient. Then you will have to label your proficiency levels that everyone will be using. So for instance, unsatisfactory for the grade 1 and superior for the grade 4. Once you have labeled your proficiency levels, you will have to define your expectation for each levels. So for instance, the lower level 1, it would be a candidate that is able to apply the competency in very simple situation, but may require close to extensive guidance. Whereas someone with the level 4, so the maximum, will be someone that is able to apply the competency in very difficult situation. That can even be a key resources on this competency that can advise and support the colleague on the competencies. So you will really need to make clear which label and which rate corresponds to what level of competencies to really allow your interviewer to have a clear view on the different rates and to rate different candidates the same way. So then it's where it will be a bit different in function of if you want to create behavioral interview or situational interview. So for the behavioral question, you will have to develop example behaviors for each proficiency levels of each competency. So the purpose of this example behavior will be to clarify and to differentiate between the proficiency levels for each competency. This is really aiming at easing the rating process by giving all the interviewer concrete behaviors to refer to as they are considering how proficient each candidate is on each competency. So that was for the behavioral interview. Now for the situational interview, instead of example behaviors, you will have to develop a representative response for each competency proficiency levels for each hypothetical job scenario question. So a representative response will illustrate how someone with the given proficiency level on the given competency might behave. So that was for the rating scale. So we went through the first steps, so the job analysis, the selection of the competencies, the interview format, the creation of the question, and the rating scale. And all those elements that you have created as of now will be part of your interview scorecard. We will come back on this concept a little bit later. So now, as a fourth step, we will create the interview probes and pilot test all the interview questions. So a probe is a question that is asked by the interviewer to help clarify a candidate's response or to ensure that the candidate has provided enough information. But when probes are necessary, all the interviewers should use very similar probes for all candidates to ensure that the candidates are given the same opportunity to succeed. And while probe may need to be tailored to address each candidate's specific response, obviously, the general meaning of a probe should always remain the same. So this is always the idea of the structured interview, to give the same experience to all the candidates. So prior to the interview, you will need to establish the desired range of probing. So for instance, you need to decide if you want no probe at all during your interview process, if you only allow your interviewers to use a limited number of probes, or if they have unlimited probes that they can use with candidates during the interview. And if probes are to be used during the interview, in advance, you will have to determine the specific probes for each question the interviewer is allowed to use. So it's really to remain in this perfectly structured process. Then we recommend to pilot test the interview question. So before using this newly created question in an actual interview with real candidate, we recommend, for instance, to give the question to colleagues for a dry run. So the goal of this pilot test will be to ensure that the questions are clearly worded, that they draw an appropriate range of response, that there is no ambiguity, that the questions are really clear. So this is really a way to test the relevance of your question in advance. So the role of your pilot test will really to indicate if there are revisions to be made in your question anywhere. And to the extent possible, this pilot test that you will run should really mirror the actual interview. So you should really try to put your colleagues or someone who with you try the new interview process to be put in the same condition as if it were a real interview process. So now you are almost ready for your structured interviewing process. We are coming to the last step, which is the interviewer's guide. So this guide will be very useful in the creation of this process, because as you expect your interviewer to have the same knowledge of the structured interview and to be able to carry the same interview, but to carry interview in the same way, to give the same opportunity and the same experience to the different candidates, you need to document your process. So the interviewer guide should provide general instruction about the interview process. It could give a summary of common rating bias, inform on the rating mistake to avoid, and if you want to add any general tips for the specific interviewing. So that was for the general information that you may want to put in your interviewer's guide. And then it should also provide information which are specific to the particular interview. So it would include the definition of each competency that is being assessed in the interview, the proficiency levels of each competency with the definition of each proficiency level, the rating scale with the example relevant for each question, and the example probes that can be used for each question. So basically, everything that you did in your previous steps has to be materialized in this guide to really have a guide that you can give to your different recruiter so they have the same level of information to carry their interview. So that was it for the 5 steps of creating a structured interview process. I hope that everything was clear about creating this process. Otherwise, feel free to already type some question in the Q&A, and we will come back on it at the end of the webinar. So I will now let Penelope show you how you can leverage the scorecard to run your structured interview.
Thank you, Solène, for these explanations. Just before starting, I would just to ask you one question.
Yes, tell me.
So you presented the rating scales on the slide. So yes. I just wanted to know more about that. Do you know, with your expertise, if companies use more, for instance, 1 to 5, 1 to 4, and
okay,
so why?
So the range scale clients or professionals are using. That's an interesting question. Well, it's recommended to use a minimum of 3 range, but the most widespread range that is often integrated in many templates or softwares that allow to do scorecard is from 1 to 4, because it's been proven the most efficient, because it's provide enough nuances for the rating, while it does not draw the interviewer into too many details and too many range. And it's recommended not to exceed around 10 items in the scale. Otherwise, it is too much, and you lose precision in the end.
Okay, good to know.
I hope this was clear.
Yes, thank you. So we are now going to introduce, in that case, the scorecards. So first, what are interview scorecards? So an interview scorecard is a list of the skills and qualifications a candidate needs to have in order to be successful in the upcoming role. So they are used to standardize the evaluation of candidates in the interview process. So in its most basic form, each interviewer completes a scorecard for each candidate. Once the hiring team compiles scorecards for every candidate, then they can compare rankings and identify the most suitable one. So we can see that interview scorecards shows multiple advantages. So first, this is visual and convenient. So no matter who uses it, recruiters, hiring managers, this is very clear and easy to use. Second, this will help to optimize the collaboration. So as this gives a clear overview on how an interview went, on the questions asked by recruiters, and also on the candidates' answers. Third, this allows you to highlight the ratings given by HR teams. So you can compare easily candidates and identify quickly the candidates with the best ratings. So regarding the advantages of using Skilled for the scorecards, this allows you to first ensure recruiters' notes are not lost but centralized via Skilled, which is also great in terms of GDPR. And then this allows you to rate your candidates with an inches system where you can give a good or a bad mark to each candidate's answer. Third, this gives you the possibility to create scorecards template based on different criteria. So this can be, for instance, depending on the departments involved, or also on the type of the job. If some jobs, for instance, require more technical qualification, specific questions, and so on. Finally, this gives you the opportunity to get an overall feedback per scorecard created, where interviewers can leave their notes, their thoughts, and describe also the next steps. So if another interview needs to be booked, for instance, if an offer needs to be sent, and so on. So interview scorecards typically includes the job-specific competencies, as Solène mentioned earlier. So this can be, for example, experience, languages, or even tool knowledges. Technical, situational, and behavioral questions in order to know more about the candidate's potential, how well a candidate meets the company's value based on the company fit questions, interest, work motivation, ratings, evaluating the quality of candidates' answers, overall feedbacks and areas of development. So for instance, a great candidate, but a bit stressed, next step to invite for another interview. And finally, a higher, not higher recommendation. So basically, there is not one perfect interview scorecard. You can find hundreds of templates and guides, but at the end, your teams needs to create an interview scorecard based on your specific candidate persona, hiring team, and company. So for this example, we have decided to create a template based on 4 main criteria, which are company and motivation, background, job skills that we divided in 3 types of questions, so technical, behavioral, and situational. And finally, the company fit. So we ask around 2-3 questions per criteria. For instance, tell me more about your previous experience, education, or the background, or what gets you excited about coming to work to determine the company fit. We also added a notes section for each criteria in order to insert the candidate's answers with a rating per question. So we can say, for instance, that the ratings apply from 1 to 4, with 1 has unsatisfactory, 2 has improvements needed, 3 has good, and 4 has very good. So I will explain this to you later during the demo. We handed the Scorecard template with an overall feedback section in order to allow the interviewer to give more details on the interview and the next steps. So no matter how you decide to create your interview scorecard, just make sure that you cover a range of information from each candidate. You can and you should adapt these scorecards to your specific needs. I am now going to share my screen and show you how we will be able to create your scorecards and use them via the Skill platform. So now we should be able to see my screen. So once you have the jobs in front of you, you just have to enter one job. I'm going to take the Customer Success Manager for this example, and then to enter on the candidate's profile. So here you can find the Actions button on the right side. You can click on Create a Scorecard. And this is where you can select the template that you have created. So as I explained before, you can really do scorecards based on the role. So for instance, HR, managers, and especially if they do not really know what kind of questions they should ask during the interviews. Or if you prefer, you can also do some templates based on the position. So if this is more IT with specific and technical questions, marketing jobs, and so on. For this example, I'm going to choose the first interview HR, which is really for standard positions. So here you can find the questions I have created in the table I show you in the slide, where you can also find the different criteria. So company and motivation just there, background, technical questions, behavioral questions, situational, and company fit. Also, here you can find an overall observations box, which is already integrated with Skill and which is already very good to use because you can see, for instance, the rating also integrated, where you can give a good or a bad mark depending on each candidate's answer. So for this example, I'm going to take some notes I have already prepared. So for instance, also, if you are used to take notes by paper, you can absolutely do it, but just make sure that you take these notes and have them on the Skill platform. So once again, we just make sure that all candidates' information are centralized, and also that we are obviously GDPR compliant. I hope you can see my screen. Like this. Apparently you are not able to see it perfectly, so now I'm just doing like a zoom. So once again, you can really give the rating based on the candidate's reply. So for instance, he gave a great reply, so I'm going to say good, that, and so on. And then this will automatically generate a final result, an average. So we can also put the overall observations just there. So the interview went very well, the candidate seems very motivated and is available to start from August. I will contact this candidate next week in order to book a second interview. Once this is all good on your side, you just have to click on Save. And what is very interesting, and especially for the collaboration, is that you can find the scorecard on the candidate's profile just here. So you can see what kind of template has been used. So first in the interview in that case, by whom this scorecard has been added, when, and you can also show the details. So you can see the questions, the rating, the candidate's answers, and so on. So this is quite useful, especially if you leave for vacation during summer and so on. You're not able to see how an interview went, so you have everything centralized on the platform. So now that I show you how you can use the scorecard and add that on the candidate's profile, I'm going to show you how you are able to add new template, because this is quite simple and easy to use. So you just have to click on Settings, just there, and go within the Scorecards tab. So here you can see that I have created lots of templates. So for manager, hiring manager, how to explain, HR, and so on. But if you want to create a new one, this is very easy. You just have to click on Create a new template. So I'm gonna put, for instance, final interview. Description, so they know which one they need to use. So I'm gonna put this scorecard needs to be used for the final interview with co-founders. The question, you can just ask a question. For instance, what would you bring to our company? Description, company fit. And we require feedback, so we just make sure that when we have the scorecards, we cannot validate the scorecard if you have not put any answer. So we can put this as required. Or another question, so how would your co-workers describe you? And also require feedback. So as you can see, this is really easy to use. If you want to have a specific order, you can also change it. And once this is done, you just have to click on Save. So here you can find the list of the templates. You can really create the one that you want, and even edit it in the future if you need to. So that was it for the scorecards. I hope this was clear. And we are going to go through the Q&A. So once again, if you have any question, you can ask them in the Q&A in the chat box. This is anonymous, so feel free to have.
Penelope, before we directly switch to the Q&A, I have one quick question about your skill demo. According to your experience with our skill client, how are they using the scorecard? Is it more that they create scorecard per type of jobs, or per role, like one for the HR and one for the hiring manager? What do you see according to your expertise?
So I think this really depends on the clients, okay. On the company size, on the strategies, and so on. Okay. So we can have some clients, for instance, who are going to have scorecards per role, as we mentioned before, where they can have, for instance, one template hiring managers. Yeah. So when a hiring manager needs to invite someone for an interview, they know that they have to select this one. Okay. And we also have some templates. We also have some clients, who do scorecards based on the job title. So,
okay, so it's more when it's for hard skill and really evaluate the job skills fit.
Absolutely, and especially like I showed during the presentation, with marketing positions, IT, and so on, so they can really ask for tool knowledges and so on.
Okay, so there is a lot of room to really customize the use of the scorecard and skill. That's great.
Absolutely, and this is why this is quite interesting, because this is really for all the clients. So depending on your needs, you can really create the scorecard of your choice.
Yeah, for all types of company.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I can see that we already have some questions. So we will reply. Don't hesitate also to share any feedbacks if you have. Okay. Integrate candidates question and to rate them as well. Integrate candidates question and structured interviews to rate them as well. So I can see that we have a question. So how do you integrate the candidates' questions in your structured interviews? Do you rate them as well? So I hope that that explained you how to do when I did the demo, but you can just prepare your questions in advance, and then once you create your scorecard, you can put the criteria in the I section and just ask multiple questions in the box. There is also a limitation of 20 questions, but otherwise you can really, ask different questions in the same box and also give the rating based on that. Let me know if I didn't reply to your question correctly. Huh? Hi, can you give us a presentation at the end? I consider is being very interesting, for sure. So we will send you the webinar presentation so after the session, so you will be able to have a look and to share it also with your team members if you want to.
Yes, and to answer to another question, is the webinar being recorded? So yes, the webinar is recorded, and for all the people that have registered to the webinar, you will tomorrow receive the link to rewatch the webinar as much as you want, and as Penelope said, feel free to share it to everyone.
We have an interesting question. So do all recruiters see the scorecards within Skilled? So no, this depends on the permission. So if you want some managers, for instance, to have access to scorecards, so you can give them access, but in the opposite case, if you do not want, you can still go within the settings, permissions, and then tick the box scorecards. So even if they have access to the candidate profile, they won't have access to the scorecards. So how do you use the different scorecards by role, by candidates, or? So once again, this really depends on your needs. So if you think that you should have multiple scorecards, one for HR, one for hiring manager, in order to help them to have the right questions, this is absolutely feasible.
Another question. Are the structured interviews relevant to use for small companies like startup? So yes, absolutely. And if I should say, structured interview fits for every size of company, every type of company, but maybe especially for startup, because it will give you a structure to your hiring process, especially when in small company, you do not necessarily have a dedicated HR team or recruiter. So you will really benefit from the advantage of the structured interview, like your question are really predetermined, so you really know where to go with your candidate. And you can really benefit from all its predictive feature and its predictive power to really recruit the best talent to make your company grow to the next level. So yeah, we definitely recommend a small company and every company to use the structured interview process.
I have more explanation from Ita. So I mean the question from the candidates during an interview, I ask the candidate if she has questions. These questions are interesting for the recruiter. So indeed, if you want to have the questions asked by candidates, in that case, you can use the overall feedbacks, for instance. So write questions and then put, for instance, the overall feedback. So there is no specific limitation of characters and so on. So you can really use the overall feedback to put the candidates' questions.
Yeah, because if I may add something, the questions that are defined in the scorecard are the questions that are aimed to be rated based on the rating scale. And normally in the structured interview, you don't really need to score your candidate question. It's more about your candidate answers. So as Penelope says, it's great to put them in the feedback part.
Can managers delete the scorecards I created? So no. Even if you are an admin and so on, so this is really the user who is going to create a scorecard who will be able to delete or to edit it. No one else will be able to do so. They will be able to visualize it, to see your comments and so on, but not to do any action.
Can we customize the grading scale in Skilled, so the little thumb grading? So we cannot customize the grading scale in Skilled. So in Skilled, we have a grading scale from 1 to 4 with 2 upper thumb until 1 lower thumb. But since the rating scale from 1 to 4 is the most commonly used in the structured interview, from the feedback we have, it's really convenient and sufficient to use for the structured interviewing for the rating. So we have another question. Can the tool also support the step 1 to 4 that we explained? So in Skilled, you have a structured way to create your job description where you will write all the competencies that are required for the job. But yet we do not have a full system to create the structure. So basically we recommend on your side to define the first step that are identifying the competencies that you can retrieve from the job description that you will have implemented in Skilled, but then the part of defining the level of your rating scale, we recommend to do it on your own, because we have the rating scale from 1 to 4 already integrated in Skilled, but it's really up to each company to define all the competencies and to really define what they want to assess, because this needs to stay and to remain customized to fit its company specificities.
Yes, so we have a few questions. So we have 3 minutes to reply. So once again, don't hesitate to ask your last questions. So is there a limitation in terms of question? So yes, as I said, there is a limitation of 20 questions per scorecard. So before, in the past, it was 10, but now we extended it to 20 in order to give you more possibilities. So if you need more, we'll still be able to see. Is it possible to edit a scorecard once it has been created? So yes, once you have created it, you can go on the candidate profile, click on the 3 dots, and then you can just edit the scorecard, so the candidate replies, and so on.
That's a good question. Are the candidates comfortable with this type of interviewing? So from the experience we have and from the feedback we got from our client that have already implemented structured interviewing with us, most of the time, yes, candidates like the fact that the process is very equal, and they also find the question very straightforward and logical, I mean, related to the job, because we also had feedback that, and according to studies, many candidates experience frustrating interview because they ask a question with no link to the job or to his or her motivation or abilities regarding to the job. So basically, they really like the fairness of the process. So we mostly get quite positive feedback regarding the structured interviewing with our candidates.
Can you assign several scorecards to one candidate within Skilled? So yes, and this is really the goal. So as we explained before, you can have different templates. So one for first interview, one for second interview, and so on. So if you want, you can just go on the candidate's profile, so do the first interview. And then even if a second interview is planned with the the hiring teams, they can just go on the candidate's profile, create a new scorecard, which will be for hiring managers. And then you will have the entire process. So the scorecard with the HR team has the first interview, and then the second one. So, for instance, if the co-founders meet the candidate for a final interview, it will be able to find all the scorecards on the candidate's profile. So we have a last question. And we will we'll end the webinar because we are already 1 minute left. So thanks for this webinar. One question: is it possible to analyze the info coming from different scorecards in order to analyze it as a whole? For example, in the first question, 18% of candidates rated 1, 23% rated 2.
For different answers to the same scorecard.
For different answers to the same scorecard.
Yes.
If
we can compare two candidates on the skill platform, right?
Yes, you can compare two candidates on the skill platform. Yes, true. So if you want, you can just have one candidate and compare scorecard 1, and then on another tab, compare it together. So indeed. So I hope, and we hope it was clear that we answered to all your questions. Thank you so much once again for your participation. The webinar will be sent to you.
Feel free to ask any question, or you have our contact on the slide, so feel free to reach out by email, or if you want to discuss more about the structured interviewing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.